Hey there, it's Kat, and this is Brews and Reviews. In today's video, I'm going to be talking to you guys about all the books that I read in June and what I thought of the things that I read. So let's get straight into this. I read 12 books in June, which is a little bit frustrating to me because my goal was to read 13 books a month, and it just didn't happen this month. I was in I don't want to say a slump, but I kind of was in a slump, so what are you going to do? I read 12 books, which is still nothing to frown about. It's just my goal was 13, so I'm a little bit disappointed in myself. 10 of those were audiobooks, one of them was an ebook, and one was an ebook manga. I had 5 3 stars, 4 4 stars, and 3 5 stars. So nothing truly terrible this month, which is good at least. Actually, let me amend that. I say nothing truly terrible. What I mean is, sometimes I like to read trash, and I rate it okay because it made me feel okay when I was reading it anyway. So I reread Twilight by Stephanie Meyer, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, which is higher than I've previously rated it. And listen, it's not a good book. I know it's not a good book. We all know it's not a good book. But sometimes when you feel like trash, you just want to read something that is like nostalgically calming. Even if it is super problematic. But it's like, I reread it, I had a nice time with it, even though it's ridiculous. To be fair, actually, mostly I picked this up because I want to read Midnight Sun. It's on my 30 to read before 30 list. And I thought, it's been ages since I read Twilight. So I thought, how am I going to compare Bella's non-existent boring girl thoughts with Edward's non-existent boring boy thoughts? So that's why I read it. The next book I picked up was Hot Vampire Next Door Season 3 by Nikki St. Crow. This is obviously part 3 in the Kindle Vella series Hot Vampire Next Door, which is aptly named. There's hot vampires, the next door. It's set in this urban fantasy world where paranormal creatures and things coexist with humans in this specific town. And yeah, there's some romance stuff, there's some vampire intrigue. Again, those cliffhangers. I thought this was going to be the end of the series, and it turns out it was not, because it left it on a cliffhanger again, and I have to wait until the next one comes out. I mean, I know I could read it episodically in the Kindle Vella sort of thing, but I just like it to come all in once, so I can put it on Goodreads. Those weren't real words, but you know what I mean. The next book that I read was All Fall Down by M.J. Arledge. This is a book that I picked up purely because of the Buzzword Readathon. And I think it was because the prompt was all, and this had all and all in full. So that's why I picked this book up. It's a detective crime thriller where a bunch of people are being murdered. And they're all people who are involved in an incident on the moors or with a creepy guy in the past. I can't really say too much about that because it is spoilery as it flashes back and forward between the two plot lines of the adults being murdered and stuff, and the kids and what's happening while they're on their Duke of Edinburgh trip. I have to say I was very much more interested in the Duke of Edinburgh trip and that storyline. The future plot line was really hard to get into because everyone was an asshole, and even the detectives, I didn't want to follow any of them. They were just not particularly very nice people. There wasn't really anyone that I wanted to root for, and I think that was the key problem I had with this book. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars, and it's extremely forgettable. The next book that I read was Grey Sister by Mark Lawrence. This is the second book in the, I think it's called the Red Sister trilogy, about like warrior assassin nuns. I think I like this one more than the first one. I enjoyed that there were some sort of grim things that were also kind of cool. I like it when it gets slightly darker. You know, I can't help it. I also really liked Sister Kettle, and the demon character that is introduced I won't say very much about because that would be spoilery. And the Abbess's storyline was also really good. I just think there was a good mix of storylines, and it wasn't just like following training in the assassin school, which the first one kind of was mostly. So this was a nicer mix, and I feel like we got more of the overall story in the world and different people's motivations, so I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I picked up was Half a King by Joe Abercrombie. This is the first book in a trilogy. I don't know what the trilogy is called, but it's the first book in it. It's a sort of grimdark high fantasy world, and I've got to say I didn't love it. I didn't. And I think that is mostly because I didn't particularly find any of the characters to get behind. This does seem to be a thing if I don't connect with a character, then I'm just following the story, then it's okay, but I don't really get as invested as I would like to get in a book. So I actually liked the fantasy and I liked different elements about this book, but I just didn't get into it as much as I wanted to. I'm definitely going to continue with the series. I know that the second one follows different characters, so that could be interesting. I'm not really sure. This book is about a prince who reluctantly has to become king or emperor or something, anyway, because his brother and father die, and it doesn't really work out for him because not everyone wants him to be king, so you know, darkness. So it's not a great time for everyone, especially him. There's slavery involved. It's a whole thing. It was good. I give it 3 out of 5 stars. It just didn't have like the oomph to push it further than that for me. The next book that I read was House of Salt and Sorrows by Emily A. Craig. Yes, I finally read this book. This book has been sort of chilling on my TBR on the outskirts, looking at me, like pick me up for ages, and I just haven't. And now I finally have, and I'm so glad I did. I'm really mad at myself that I put it off for so long because I really enjoyed it. This had so many gothic vibes. I heard it was like a 12 Dancing Princesses retelling, and I can kind of see elements of that, but I don't know that original fairy tale very well. So while there are bits of that, I think it lent more towards like the gothic creepy side, and I really like that. So some like really grim things that happened, and I was like, yeah, more of that please. I did really enjoy it. I think that the thing that happened at the end, I wasn't altogether surprised by that. I was like, oh, it's definitely this person, and I was correct. I basically called who was responsible for what was happening, and I was right. So that was a bit annoying, but also I'm not that mad about it because I just kind of liked it. I don't know, it was good. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars because it was just generally enjoyable and I had a good time with it. So yeah. The next book that I read was The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. This is a sci-fi world hopping type book where people can travel between worlds only if their counterpart in the other worlds are dead. So the main character is exceedingly good at dying in all of the realms, and there's only like 8 of her left. So when the book starts, another one of her has just been killed, so she goes to this new world and things happen. I really like the mechanics of traveling between these multiverse world things, and I like the characters. I liked what happened. I feel like there could have been so much more explained with it, and I can understand why this is quite a Marmite book for people, but I really enjoyed it and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I picked up was Proven Guilty by Jim Butcher. This is a Dresden book. I was gonna say what number Dresden book it is. I feel like it's like 8 or 9. It might be 9 in the series. I enjoyed this book, as usual, continue to enjoy Dresden. I think this one had a really cool premise of like sort of Comic-Con type thing, but was like a horror fest and horror movie villains coming alive and killing people, and I love that because I love horror. I really, really enjoy horror. I'm kind of obsessed with Dead Meat at the moment, and like if you don't follow them on YouTube then you really should, because just so good, such good content. So the story was good overall. I think the only thing that sort of pegged this one down a little bit for me was Harry Dresden's thoughts about women, because he just can't keep it in his pants. He can't keep his thoughts under control, particularly about Molly, because she is a barely legal woman who is his friend's daughter, and I'm like, come on man, come on, you knew this girl when she was really young and you're being really creepy about it. And I don't know, if you just like completely take out that like whole thing and you just keep talking about how she's like just of age, and I'm like, stop it, it's weird. So there's that. If that wasn't in it then this book would be better, but it is in it, so like, I don't know, sometimes Harry Dresden needs a slap is what I'm trying to say here. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It's a very low 4 out of 5 stars, but you know, somebody needs to knock some sense into Harry, and like, he just needs to leave women alone. The next book I picked up was a non-fiction book called Endurance, Shackleton's Incredible Journey, and that was by Alfred Lansing. And I don't know why I picked this up. I totally blame Kaz from Cats and Camera, because she keeps talking about all these polar books, and then I'm like, that sounds quite interesting really. And this book was free, I think, so then I read it. So here we are. I don't usually read non-fiction. I don't know. I think I'm a little bit strange when it comes to picking up non-fiction, because I like it when it's very story driven. I like to sort of feel what the characters are feeling, and I feel like this was kind of more of a general overview, and they didn't really give me enough details into people with emotions. It was like, oh, and the people were very disheartened and they decided to do this. And it doesn't make me feel for them the way that I want to feel for them. Like, people are not doing super well. They have to kill their animals at one point, which was very sad. And I wanted to feel more, and I didn't. So I give it 3 out of 5 stars because it was still good and it was still good to hear about the information. I just don't think that it went into any sort of detail that I would have particularly liked. It was just like watching a very quick, like, half-hour documentary on endurance, I think. The next book I picked up was Uzumaki by Junji Ito. This is a manga and it's a horror manga, and I have been sort of eyeing up Junji Ito's work for ages, and I finally went there and picked it up. I mostly have not been picking it up because it's so expensive, but they are like 600 something pages long, so I kind of sort of forgive that. So Uzumaki is spirals. It's a horror of spirals. There are just, everything is spirals, and by the time you get to the end of that, like, I felt dizzy. I was like, I don't know if all of the spiraling has just made me like feel a little bit sick, because just looking at all of the spirals over and over again. Very inventive, very cool, very creepy. If you're after a horror manga, then I would definitely go for that. I think it's really interesting. It starts off a little bit like Monster of the Week, chapter by chapter, like different things are happening and you're like, oh, they're all to do with spirals, but really kind of unconnected. And then as it goes on, it becomes more of like a big thing. I would say that I preferred the first and second like volumes or parts of this. I think when twisters started to become involved, I was less interested in that because I just didn't think that was creepy. Like, while twisters are natural disasters, and I know that it's not quite what is happening in Uzumaki, but while they are scary, I don't think that they are creepy, and I think this really shines when like creepy things are happening. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. I am definitely looking into getting some more Junji Ito stuff because it was creepy and I liked it, and it was 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I picked up was Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. I really enjoyed this book, much more than I was expecting to. I really wasn't sure based on the premise. It's about a woman who grew up in a library, and the library is magic, and different magics and knowledges are contained inside the books, but they're kind of like living, and they can go bad if they are mistreated. That is like a really poor synopsis of the actual plot, but that's just like the background of the world. The plot is definitely more interesting than that. I really liked it. I really liked all of the characters. I thought that like the magic system was kind of fascinating. I also love the library. I just think it's really cool. And Silas is one of my new favourite characters. If you saw my mid-year freak out tag, then you will know that he is one of my favourite characters of this year. I kind of love how he could possibly kill you if he wanted to, and he doesn't, because he's kind of like friend who could murder. I also gave that one 5 out of 5 stars. And lastly, I decided to do a reread of Beneath the Dark Eyes by Greg Beck, and this one is a bit like Jurassic Park in the Antarctic with like octopuses and sea creature-y type things. It doesn't go well for a lot of people. Scientists and military people go to this place in the Antarctic, and it's not a nice time for them. I've got to say, I much preferred it the first time that I read this. The second time I was a bit like, well, it's, you know, less creepy this time because I know what's going to happen, and like the characters aren't great, but I still enjoyed it, and it's like a fun like action thing. It's not great, but I love it, and I really like that kind of enclosed setting where beasties eat people. I think that is really hits it in the core of like the horror that I like, is when beasts eat people in an enclosed setting. So yeah, I give it 3 out of 5 stars this time, which is definitely a downgrade from the first time I read it, but you know, I still enjoyed it. So those are the books I read in June. Let me know what you read in June, and you know, I know this video is really late, but you can remember what you read in June. It's only a month ago, maybe, if I post this on time. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!